This is Patrick Hoban, widely considered the best Yu-Gi-Oh player of all time, and in just one move, he's about to throw away his entire reputation.
To do what he did, you gotta be kind of a shitty person, man.
This is the story of how Yu-Gi-Oh's greatest player became its biggest villain. Now, to understand how we got here, we first need to understand who exactly Patrick Hoban is. So, what was your first impression of Patrick? Well, as in his personality and stuff. Patrick Hoban's story would start the same way a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players do. He first grew up in Florida, at least until his mom's job forced the family to relocate. A new school in 3rd grade, 2 in 4th, 2 more in 5th. Patrick never really got to put down roots. He was always the awkward new kid in class. No real sense of staying anywhere long enough to belong. But the one thing that followed him everywhere? You see, he'd initially been obsessed with Pokemon first, like every other kid of the early 2000s, until a friend pulled him into the new card game they were all playing.
Teach me how to play Duel Monsters. Dueling Monsters? Duel Monsters, you Nimrod!
And in the single booster pack, Patrick pulled an ultra rare Time Wizard, which kicked off his lifelong obsession with Yu-Gi-Oh! He found his competitive spirit at the local card shop which ran tournaments every week, and found his first real rival, a player named Robbie. He crushed the tournament every week with his Morphing Jar deck. To Patrick, Robbie felt like an unsurmountable wall. So, after he pressed him, "How did you get this good?" And Robbie's answer was a shock. Across the country, there were thousands of stronger players. Robbie was just a middle-sized fish in a small pond, but he had one edge over everyone else at the shop. A website called metagame.com, and for Pat, that was his first glimpse into what competitive Yu-Gi-Oh could look like. While other kids in the 2000s would hang up posters of Jordan or Kobe, Pat was buried in articles about Yu-Gi-Oh players like Paul Leviton or Jerry Wang. To Hoban, Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't just a card game. It was everything. It was the one thing that stayed consistent no matter which school he ended up in, no matter which city, no matter how many times he had to start over as the new kid. It was the one place he could actually prove something. His first real shot to prove himself came at a regional tournament in Raleigh, going 4-4. He went home with nothing. It was still a respectable record for his first tournament, sure, but Patrick knew that periodic regional tournaments weren't going to cut it. He needed more. More reps, more competition, more everything. The next move was the forums. These were outdated relics of the internet, where serious Yu-Gi-Oh players could discuss meta tactics and deck theory. And within these forums existed the concept of teams, basically groups of players who'd band together, represent a name, and compete against other teams in head-to-head matches called wars.
But I've known Pat, even before Duelist Grounds on another website called Yu-Gi-Oh ETC, and we put Pat on our trainee team. Funny looking back on it that we had that sort of trainee on our war duel team. God knows how. I think we were all terrible.
And Pat threw himself head in first. He bounced from team to team. Omerta, Enigma, Heartless. He even started a couple of his own. But for Pat, all these teams were stepping stones for a single destination. The team Simply Clutch. These were by far the best team on the site. They had a 20-0 record against every other team. And so once Patrick felt he was ready, he did what any naive kid would do. For a kid who'd grown up getting whatever he wanted, whose mom had always made sure the next thing was taken care of, this was generally new. He'd never been told he wasn't good enough before, not at anything that mattered. He'd hated it, but instead of walking away, he redirected. If they wouldn't let him in, he'd become better than them. And so that led Patrick to Duelist Grounds, more competitive community than the average Yu-Gi-Oh forum. The Yu-Gi-Oh players on here were the best of the best online. Pat found his people here.
Patty!
He found teammates. He found genuine lifelong friends. But DGZ had a culture of its own.
I think one of the highest threads on Duelist Grounds was one that was bullying Patrick. Pat had posted a story about meeting up with someone. It was maybe something related to a girl, whatever. And someone went really in depth in terms of trying to backtrack whether or not Pat was telling the truth. And they found out that he wasn't, and it sort of just exploded from there.
But out of everyone on DGZ, one name would leave a mark deeper than the rest. Christian Centeno. Known online as Soul, Christian was one of Pat's teammates, and from the moment they met, he made it his personal mission to remind Pat where he stood.
And there was some classic quotes of Patrick can't top a jump, something, people calling him fat, this and that. So he was copying all sorts of abuse.
It wasn't just about Yu-Gi-Oh! It was everything. Patrick's appearance, his ideas, the way he carried himself. Christian was the better player, and Pat knew it, and Christian made absolutely sure he never forgot it. This went on for 2 more years. Most people would have distanced themselves, found a different team, a different corner of the internet, and moved on. But Patrick stayed, and every session, every war match, every time Christian dismissed him, it went somewhere. It didn't disappear, it just compressed. So for years, every time he sat down to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, there was only one thing on his mind: to become better than Christian. And in 2010, when Shonen Jump Nashville was announced, Patrick saw his opening. To prove to Christian that he was a good player. He didn't scrape by top 32, not top 16, not even top 8.
Hey guys, this is Yu-Gi-Oh! 96 Productions, and here's the results of Shonen Jump Championship Nashville. Patrick Hoban got 4th.
Because Patrick Hoban had come in 4th place at an 800-person event.
There were some people back in the day, it would be online only, and they didn't really, translate into real life. So the online people would call the people that travel to events like, you're a nerd, you're this, you're that, and they would sort of have their own high horse. Like, I'm good at this game, but I choose not to travel, like, you're the one wasting your time, blah, blah, blah. So Soul was one of those ones, still is, God bless him.
In Christian's eyes, the gap was still there, and a single result didn't close it. He didn't travel to events, he only played online. One top didn't mean anything, so Pat continued to grind, and the results followed. Top 8 Nationals 2010.
You can smile any harder, Pat.
Top 16 Indianapolis. 3 major tops back to back. To Pat, it was undeniable that he had finally become better than Chris. He had finally shut Chris up, or so he thought. As Patrick continued to travel to every tournament he could in 2011, and then nothing. Dallas, Charlotte, Anaheim, Orlando, Providence, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Columbus. 8 events, 0 tops. He'd show up, play well enough to feel like he belonged, but then fall short. Often close enough to be on the precipice of topping, but never close enough. 2012 was even worse. 10 events, 0 top cuts. Was Chris right? Was Patrick really that bad of a player? But somewhere in the middle of the drought, there was one tournament that stood out. YCS Kansas City. Every other trip had been funded by his mother, but after a disagreement, she pulled the funding. Suddenly, there was no guarantee that there was a next tournament. No safety net. Just Patrick, his deck, and the uncomfortable reality that if he wanted to be there, he had to earn it. And then...
Alright, today we have another top 8 finalist at YCS Terrible Kansas City. What was your name and what was you playing?
Patrick Hoban, and I'm playing Lance.
To Patrick, this wasn't a coincidence. Think about what drove him to this point. The humiliation of losing to Robbie every week at locals. The rejection from Simply Clutch. 2 years of Christian Santano telling him he would never be good enough. Every single one of these things had lit a fire under Pat, and every single time he did well, he put that fire out himself. By getting the result he wanted and deciding he already proved his point. The hunger disappeared the moment it was satisfied, and that's the trap. So what? There's always the next tournament. But then, in late 2012, everything fell apart. His grandfather passed away. His mother fell into a deep depression. His house got repossessed, the car too. And then Patrick found out his mother had taken $10,000 worth of loans in his name. Debt he would have to carry whether he wanted to or not. For the first time in his life, Patrick Hoban had nothing. No funding, no fallback, no guarantee the next month would look anything like this one. The boy who had grown up getting whatever he wanted, who had floated for Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments on his mom's wallet. That version of Patrick was gone. Because now, Patrick Hoban was about to become the most dangerous player in the game.
Patrick Hoban is probably being revered as one of the best players in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!
David J. Keener III and Patrick Jefferson Hoban still have to duel so that we can crown the 2011 North American champion.
From 2013, Patrick went on a generational run. 17 top 32 finishes across 2 years. 8 tops in 2013 alone. US National Champion. First place at ARG Fort Worth. Top 4 at YCS Toronto. Then in 2014, first place YCS Anaheim. First place YCS Toronto. Win after win after win. Patrick Hoban had accomplished more in just a couple of years than most players could ever hope for. He was, and to this day, is considered one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Players the game had ever seen. Patrick Hoban wasn't a player who has forged by innate talent, he was forged by losing everything else first.
Pat was eat, breathe, sleep Yu-Gi-Oh! He'll show up from school or whatever. Let's go, we gotta go get ready to play Yu-Gi-Oh! We just rushing right to the room and play Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, for hours on hours on hours, and like...
But the wins were only half of it, because where Pat really separated himself wasn't at the top tables, it was in how he thought about the game. Patrick treated it like a system to be solved. Unlike other top players of the time, Pat had a much more analytical approach to deck building.
One of the biggest differences between Pat and the other contemporary pro duelists of his time is much more he tried to focus more on math, logic.
Like Billy Break, his deck building was more vibes, but then you'd have Pat who would have a more concise deck list, like would stick to 40, and even in eras now, you know, Pat deck building will be, or you know, even Triple, I think, has been taking Pat deck lists.
And then he also didn't like look to play the spirited Yu-Gi-Oh! Like he didn't really care if it was a back and forth game. If he had the opportunity to play Floodgates instantly win the duel, that was something that he would very happily do, and that's something that we've ever since been doing. We've been abusing every single exploitable mechanic and card.
He invented terminology not competitive players still use to this day: starter, extender. He was writing articles for alternate reality games, spreading competitive theory to thousands of players who'd never had access to it before. Basically, metagame.com, except this time he was the one writing the content. But his most famous contribution wasn't a tournament win or an article. It was a card that had been sitting in bulk bins for 11 years.
He knew how revolutionary was gonna make it. He knew before it even happened, before someone played, before they went up to $100 each, blah blah blah. He knew it was so crazy the vision he had on it.
Upstart Goblin is a spell card that lets you draw one card while giving your opponent 1,000 life points. On the surface, it sounds useless, detrimental even. Nobody ever played this card. You're giving your opponent life points while just drawing a card that you could have had in the first place. But Patrick saw something nobody else had bothered to look for.
I think you should play upstarts and everything just because it's fewer cards. Upstart theory.
In Yu-Gi-Oh!, consistency is everything. The whole reason competitive players won 40 cards instead of 60 is to maximize the chance of drawing what they need. 3 Upstart Goblins in a 40 card deck means you're effectively playing 37 cards, which with a 37 card deck now means that you're increasing the chances of seeing your more valuable cards. The crazy thing is, the card had existed since 2002. 11 years of bulk bins, invisible to everyone, but not Patrick Hoban. Hell, he even wrote a book about the optimal way to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was essentially a bible on Patrick Hoban's insights into Yu-Gi-Oh! But the thing is, if you ask many Yu-Gi-Oh! Players of the time their opinion about Patrick Hoban, other than his talent for the game, they'll all say the same thing. They find him insufferable.
So, you know what was funny? The first time I told Pat, bro, you know a lot of people don't like you.
Fuck you, Patrick Hoban, you self-centered, spoiled son of a bitch.
Hoban has taken his own ego and taken it too far.
Pat Hoban picked up from that, saying the kid's fucking
Son of a bitch can go die in a goddamn well, and I hope somebody take his ass out round 1, 2, 3, and 4. YCS Miami. What the
Patrick Hoban, I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's too damn old to be starting shit with a little kid.
Hoban goes on to say, I'm gonna end your fucking career. I'm gonna get you, you're done. I'm gonna make sure you get banned. Blah, 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 blah.
My friend Tony got really angry, and he said to Patrick Hoban, all you do is play Yu-Gi-Oh! With your life because you get no pussy, and who you talk shit to a 16-year-old kid.
Over the years that Pat has played the game, he's always been a bit of an abrasive character. For every player that respects and admires him, there's another player that has a story about Patrick Hoban rubbing them the wrong way.
One thing you gotta know about Pat is he is passionate. I've seen Pat blow up on a player because they did something wild, like they were in the wrong, and he just exploded. And I'm just like, probably some bipolar shit, who knows.
There's even been allegations of an assault Pat made during YCS Berlin.
Patrick Hoban was talking to some random people,
having a really loud, kind of aggressive argument,
and he was raising his voice. He was like, right, get you break, really good.
The hotel staff are really pretty uncomfortable. Like you can tell everyone around him is just what the hell is this guy doing? He's something crazy.
Muscular guy goes up to Hoban
and says to him, look, you just need to calm down.
Patrick Hoban turns around and he does this whole thing. He squares up to Connor, saying,
oh, I'm one of the best players in the world. And then he starts smacking Connor Green in the face.
After getting banned off an online Yu-Gi-Oh! Sim, Patrick Hoban would reportedly send an image of, well, you can read that for yourself. You see, Pat's reputation first stemmed from Duelist Grounds, the same forum where he'd first found his people. Pat had a reputation of getting into long and passionate arguments with other people over Yu-Gi-Oh! Mostly with people he felt didn't know what they were talking about. And the thing about Pat was that he was usually right, which somehow made it worse.
Obviously, a younger Patrick probably got into arguments he didn't need to get into. I think it was the rep department we've had plus or minus rep, and a lot of the posts would be, ratioed not in favor of Pat. So,
but perhaps what most players would dislike about Pat was the use of angle shooting. A lot of players would take note that while skill was remarkable at advancing the game, it was clear that winning came first, no matter the cost. What was annoying to so many people was the fact that alongside his attitude, it was the fact that he had skill to back it up. While his analytical and logical mind was a clear strength in making him succeed at Yu-Gi-Oh!, it also appeared to go the other way, where winning was the only thing that mattered.
At our locals, they would give us the option to split top cut because, it's like 11 p.m. We done played 5 rounds. It's getting late, and people are like, let's just split top 8 so we can go home. And Pat's like, no, I'm not doing that shit. Like, we gonna play until 1 a.m.
And perhaps the clearest example of this is with his book. And genuinely, it is a valuable competitive resource. But the more you read, the more a certain philosophy started to emerge. One reviewer noted that part of that includes elements that to some may seem self-aggrandizing, and therefore unconvincing. Or even worse, or expect author to have any typical concerns about social mores and how they relate to mutual enjoyment of gameplay. There's entire sections that read like a manual for psychological warfare. Small talk with your opponent, not to be friendly but to figure out how good they are. Running cards with foreign text, it wasn't out of necessity or because they looked cool. If the opponent asks what a card does, you know what they're planning to do. These mind games even extended to outside of the game entirely, because at one point Patrick describes deliberately starting an argument with his girlfriend over something he didn't actually care much about, then backing down. And in classic Hoban fashion, the reasoning was simple. If she saw him as someone willing to give in, she'd be more likely to do the same when it actually mattered to him. The worst part could be considered on page 233, where the book describes an action that could be considered a cheat, which would get any player who followed that action disqualified. To many players, Hoban's entire worldview came down to a single principle. If the rules allowed it, it's fair game, even at the cost of any goodwill you had in the process. And that mentality would eventually lead to the biggest controversy of his entire career. It's March 2015. Pat's playing in a tournament in ARG, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The best deck of the format is Necros. If you don't know what Necros is, imagine everything broken about Yu-Gi-Oh! And concentrating it into a single deck. The deck had inbuilt hand traps, consistency to an insulting degree, and it was by far the best and most expensive deck of the format.
If you were just looking to pick up just the bare bones Necro engine, you'd probably be shelling out roughly almost $600.
It had powerful Necros monsters with Necros of Unicorn, whose effect could single-handedly shut down a lot of the other meta decks at the time. The Necros of Trishula, a card so powerful it could banish a card from an opponent's hand, field, and grave. In fact, its effect is so strong that an original version of the card was banned, a Necros of Rionak, which could return any 2 extra deck monsters back to the extra deck. The deck was so powerful that players had considered it one of the largest steps in power creep of the modern era. But the most dangerous card in the deck wasn't even a Necros card. It was Jin, Releaser of Rituals. Jin's effect was simple. If you use it to ritual summon a monster, your opponent cannot special summon while that monster is on the field. In a game where special summoning is essentially how you can make a play, that single line of text was a death sentence to most decks. It meant you couldn't make plays, couldn't make a comeback, you can barely even make a field to defend yourself. The closest card which had a similar effect, Vanity's Emptiness, was limited to 1 copy and later even banned. Jin did the same thing, but only to your opponent. Now you might be thinking, okay, just destroy the ritual monster and the lock goes away. Sounds simple, right? The problem was the ritual Necros players typically used under the lock was Necros of Clausulus, which sat at 2300 defense, already an uphill battle to run over. But the important thing was that because your special summons were completely shut off, the high attack monsters you normally summoned to deal with it were mostly off the table. And even if you somehow managed to get a monster to run it over, you would still need to deal with Necros of Valkyrius, which could end the battle phase. And then on the next turn, Necros of Trishula could wipe out whatever you had on your field. Spells and traps weren't that much of a help either. Necros of Trishula also had another effect, which could negate the activation of any effect that targeted your other cards. Essentially, trying to play against the Jin lock was fighting with both hands tied behind your back. And the worst part is that Necros had no trouble getting Jin's effect out at any time, as they had easy access to Lavalville Chain, a rank 4 Xyz card, which let you send any card from your deck to the grave. This meant that any Necros player basically had full-time lifetime access to the Jin lock, as long as they were able to summon 2 level 4 monsters, which for Necros was as easy as breathing. And while Necros were a step beyond every other deck, Necros mirror matches were surprisingly interactive and skill intensive. More often than not, the better player walked away with the win. Even for a Necros deck, the moment a Jin lock landed on a Necros player, all of that went out the window. So any Necros mirror match would essentially boil down to one question: who could pull off Jin faster? So competitive players found a workaround. Each player has the option of siding out cards of their main deck into what is known as a side deck, a group of 15 cards which cover the deck's weaknesses against certain matchups. The idea first appeared in the Dragon Ruler format, popularized ironically by Patrick Hoban himself, a similarly oppressive era where the best deck had blow-up cards that could swing a game with almost no counterplay. By the time Necros had come around, the same problem had resurfaced, and the same solution followed. In the Necros mirror match, after game 1, both players would reach into their deck, pull out their single copy of Jin, and place it face up on the table and side it out, so the game would in theory become Jinless. And it worked, because most players only ran a single copy anyway. They didn't need more than one, as the Laval chain could access it at any moment. So this brings us back to the tournament in the ARG Fort Lauderdale. Imagine you're a player sitting across from Patrick Hoban, one of the best players in America. You've played game 1.
Hoban scooped that game. Yeah, Hoban's gonna scoop up.
Then he asks the question. You nod, then you both flip your Jin face up on the field and swap it out. You shuffle. You proceed to game 2, but then in your second game, something feels off. He summons 2 level 4s, then summons Laval Train, and then he does the unthinkable. He sends Jin to his grave.
Oh man, does he? We talked about that for a while, but you're just being a savage at that point. You know, people kept asking, like, do you run second to Jin? Can I look through your deck? I just not styled the Jin at that point. I thought it was the Jin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it looked like a Jin.
Yeah.
What Hoban had done was run 2 copies, one in the main deck and one in the side deck. He'd shown you his main copy, and then he'd sided it out, exactly like he said. But then he would side his second copy from his side deck straight back in. Technically, he hadn't lied. He had sided out a Jin, he just hadn't mentioned the other one. Safe to say, this didn't go well down with the Yu-Gi-Oh community. While Patrick's games were barely streamed, many eyewitnesses had seen this happening, and within hours, it was everywhere. Facebook, Reddit, online forums. Every corner of the Yu-Gi-Oh internet had an opinion.
And today I thought I'd bring to you a video discussing the whole controversy that's been stirred up surrounding Patrick Hoban and what happened at ARG Fort Lauderdale.
It's a interesting one because it's got the community kind of split a little bit.
Legally, did he cheat? Probably not, but like...
That's just so... That's dumb. Like,
it's a little bit disgusting in my opinion, because if someone's that desperate to pull the wool over someone's eyes,
you gotta be kind of a shitty person, man.
For many players, this felt like the culmination of everything they disliked about Patrick Hoban. It wasn't just the move itself, it was what the move represented. The gentleman's agreement was built on trust. It's a fragile contract that made the game a bit more bearable, and Patrick had taken the social contract and weaponized the goodwill of his opponent against them. Before Jin Gate, both players could have a level of trust that their opponent wasn't running Jin. But now? Well, he had never had the best reputation as an upstanding duelist. Jin Gate was basically the incident that would elevate Patrick's status to an unethical duelist who would win no matter the cost. And the Weevil comparisons were not lost on the player base. There was also another camp of players though. The reaction was basically a shrug. Gentlemen's agreements have no business existing at a competitive tournament in the first place. You're there to win, not to make friends. If the rules allow it, it's fair game, and if you're naive to trust your opponent at a tournament, that's on you. The consensus that emerged was somewhere in the middle. What Patrick did wasn't cheating. It wasn't illegal. It was technically within the bounds of the rules to do so. Gentlemen's agreements were unenforceable by rule anyways. So while many in the community agreed that he shouldn't be banned, they also agreed that it wasn't something they could respect. But what's particularly interesting is just how differently the wider card game community reacted to Jin Gate. Because while Yu-Gi-Oh players were absolutely losing their minds at what Patrick Hoban had done, a thread discussing the incident in the Magic the Gathering subreddit had a total 180 in opinions. As one commenter would put it, they're no gentlemen, they're only competitors. Another would note, if the card game requires gentlemen's agreements to function, your card game is a joke. While it might not have mattered to Patrick, the cost of gaining every advantage possible, no matter what social capital he had burned along the way, had finally caught up with him. It blew up his reputation and left a stain on his legacy. But perhaps the most ironic thing about the entire situation is that Patrick Hoban had lost the match.
Give him some scoop.
space time.
Yeah.
Not just that, he had performed exceedingly poorly at the tournament. He hadn't even placed in a ranking spot. But perhaps the funniest thing about the tournament was that there wasn't even a prize. Patrick Hoban had quite literally ruined his reputation for his love of the game. When the Jin Gate happened, and what do you remember how Patrick and the Leverett brothers felt about it?
Pat didn't give a damn. He knew it was gonna start. Like, he knew it was gonna start some shit. He did not care.
In the aftermath, Patrick did what Patrick always did. He wrote an article about ethics. And typical of Pat, the article reads like you'd expect. In it, he makes the case that any advantage you can gain within the rules is fair game. That lying about your side deck is no different to bluffing a set mirror force. That the line between a good player and everyone else is a willingness to do what others won't. He even quotes David Serlin, a similarly controversial figure in the fighting game community, who held the same philosophy to drive the point home. As Serlin put it, when you create a button that says press this for an advantage, then someone presses it for an advantage, you don't get to call that unsportsmanlike. And, well, the comments on that article didn't exactly hold back. While there were plenty of players who defended Hoban, there were just as many commenters letting Patrick know how they really felt. It worked so well, he didn't top. Too long, didn't read. It's okay to be a complete dickwad as long as you stay within the starter deck's rulebook. All of the nice words, long ranting, doesn't change that you played like a scumbag. It's like coating fecal matter with gold paint saying it's gold nuggets, but they're just poo nuggets, and that's what you are, Hoban. A small, smelly, corn-encrusted, scummy poo nugget. When you get them to side out their gins. And funnily enough, Jin Gate wasn't the only controversy at this tournament, as the player who came in second place got DQ'd for cheating, but now barely a footnote in comparison to Jin Gate. A couple months later, Jin was banned, much to the delight of literally every Yu-Gi-Oh player.
Jin released a rituals banned. Jin's banned!
Jin's banned! Jin's banned! They banned it!
And on April 11th, 2016, Upstart was limited, and the comments are basically what you'd expect. And it wouldn't be too long before gentlemen agreements were also banned in general, most likely in a reaction to the controversy around Jin Gate, along with revealing your side deck as breaking of the rules. The era of gentlemen agreements was over, and for a while, Patrick Hoban's reputation never really recovered. Any Facebook post that mentioned Pat would be filled with comments full of vitriol or some sort of attack on his character. Jin Gate left such a stain on his legacy that it became a reflex almost to make some kind of Jin joke every time his name came up. But I haven't been entirely honest with you, because for all the forum posts and comment sections, I spoke to the people who were actually there. People who knew Pat on a personal level, and their version of Patrick paints an entirely different story. Is there anything you think people got consistently wrong about Patrick Hoban?
I think it's people thinking Pat wasn't a good person.
He is a nice guy. He's just super nice. Man, if you just walk up to Pat, he might not know who you are, even if you met him 5 times, because he's just stupid like that.
Throughout every interaction I had with him, Pat was always fine. He was just an all-around okay guy that caught a bad rap.
But like, he is going to give you a very warm welcome. He's going to talk to you about whatever. He might sign your card if you ask him to take a picture.
As he got better and he got a little bit more cocky, they didn't like him for that reason. So they didn't like him because he got good. You never heard Pat bullying someone because they bullied him. He'd always be quiet. So.
And here's where it gets interesting, because a year later in his book, Hoban would write something that reframed the story.
I don't know if anyone knows this, but I never actually did it, but I intended to do it. Believe me, it just 4 rounds in a row. It was like I went to game 1 in time, and then another guy told me no, and then like, I don't know, it was just like 4 separate things, and it never actually came up.
The move that defined his legacy. The incident that followed his name for a decade. The reason why in 2015, half the Yu-Gi-Oh! Internet hated him. He never actually did it.
The stuff like the gentleman's agreement, the Jin Gate, stuff like that, you know, stuff that didn't actually even happen. I think Zach was the one who tried to do it during the tournament, and someone was like, oh, okay. Word would spread, and it would go through 100 different people before it, you know, got to the final Facebook post or whatever, and people will make up their own stories as they go. So.
But if anybody else on the outside looking in, you would think he did it to start controversy. Like, as far as he's concerned, an honest thing to do.
So that brings us to the question, why didn't he just explain himself at the time? Because by that point, it didn't matter. The story had already spread, and by his own admission, correcting it would only have meant explaining who was doing it. And that wasn't a conversation he was interested in having. He still wasn't innocent though. He'd planned on doing the move, and would have if the cards had fallen differently. But the version of events that became his legacy was in the end just a fabrication of reality. The internet had built a villain, and Patrick being Patrick didn't exactly fight back.
Casual players make up these rumors or like little stitchings about the way pro players are, and then they walk around enforcing that thought. Like they're just like they look at you and think, oh man, this guy thinks he's better than you, or blah blah blah, stuff like that.
Patrick at his core wasn't a villain that the internet made him out to be. He was just someone whose passion for the game occasionally exceeded what some people could tolerate. And when it mattered, he took the blame for a friend without hesitation. Patrick's biggest crime was that he had the social skills of a Yu-Gi-Oh player. And so to cap off Gin Gate, I'll end it with my favorite gin joke I came across. Patrick Hoban walks into a bar and orders a drink. The waitress asks, "Double gin?" Patrick leaves the bar. You've just watched one of the most controversial matches in Yu-Gi-Oh! But what if I told you there was another match that was just as controversial, where a 10-year-old was forced to duel a Yu-Gi-Oh! World Champion? Check this video out to see what happened.